Hello and welcome back to FranklinCovey's On Leadership series. I'm your weekly host, Scott Miller, and I serve as the interviewer every week with new guests that come to us sometimes live in the studio and sometimes via satellite on our screen. Each week we try to pick someone that's got an interesting perspective on leadership development. Most times these names aren't necessarily household names. These are people who maybe have written a book, or they're an academic, a CEO, someone who's learned something especially relevant, and we choose to bring a spotlight to them. And then occasionally, like today, we have someone who is a household name. And our guest today is Bill Engvall, the master communicator. Bill, welcome to On Leadership.
Thank you, Scott. Good to see you. I've never had the words CEO, and I know you said CEO, academic, and leaders, and those three words have never been associated with me.
Well, they are today.
Today I'm a CEO.
Today I say you are a master communicator because you are an expert at communication. Your chosen medium, as most people know you, is through entertainment and through comedy, right? You're a professional comedian. And people have followed your career for 20 years. I'm delighted you're here.
It's an honor to be here.
Great to have you on set. You're a resident of Utah.
Yep.
So welcome to FranklinCovey. I'd like to take a couple of minutes and have you share first kind of your journey. How did you come into becoming one of the world's most renowned comedians?
Well, Scott, I wish I had a great story for you. Basically what happened was I was in college and discovered women and beer, and studies went out the window. So I left school and moved back to Dallas, where I rented a little apartment, and I was spinning records in a nightclub, and they opened up a comedy club. And my friend, who was the bouncer at the club, at the disco, said, let's go watch Amateur Night. So I thought, well, let's go down there and watch some guys stink it up.
And you were early 20s at this point?
Yeah, early 20s. Yeah. And so we got down there, and a couple of rounds of liquid encouragement went through us, and they talked me into going up on stage. And so I went up and I just did 5 minutes on being a DJ in a nightclub and just made up stuff, really. And people laughed. And I remember thinking, well, this is kind of cool. Because I was a huge comedy fan, because my dad always had Bob Newhart records, and I was a big fan of Carlin and Pryor and Steve Martin and all that. So, but the thought of it being a job was just not even on the radar. So I finished my set, and the lady who owned the comedy club said, would you like to be the house MC? And to show you where I was in my life, I said, what does it pay? And it paid $25 a week more than I was making at the disco. Excuse me. And so I said, what do I have to do? She goes, you pick the comics up at the airport on Monday, you MC the shows throughout the week, and then you drive them back to the airport. And I thought, well, this is a great job. It fulfilled all my job requirements. I could work at night, drink on the job, and sleep in late. So it was the perfect job for me. But what I didn't realize was that on another level, I worked with the greats. I worked with Seinfeld and Shandling and Leno and Eddie Murphy and all these people. And basically through, I guess, osmosis, I kind of learned how to write jokes and communicate my message with the audience, because comedy is really different in the sense of communication, because if you go hear a band and they play a song you don't like, you don't leave. But with comedy, it's very personal. People take it very personally. And so if they don't like a joke that you do, they don't like you, they don't like the way you think, they don't like your religion, they like nothing about you.
Audiences are fickle.
Very fickle. And, there was something about it that just, I never thought of it as a job until probably, I started in 80, probably till 97 did I really think of it as a job. But what I learned, and we'll get into it more, is that there's and I didn't work at this, I just was blessed with this ability to relate to an audience. Which is why I also do a lot of corporate jobs, because they know that I can. And it's if you're not, there's a lot of comics that we call them comics. Those are the guys that play to the guys in the back of the room. The other comics, everybody goes, oh, wow, he's hip. I learned really early on, that's not the people who pay your bills. So I learned.
It's gratifying,
but
it's not.
It's great for your peers to think you're hip, but if the audience is just staring at you, then you're not going to get booked back.
Sure. Tell me the role that blue-collar comedy played in helping launching your brand, and remind the audience kind of who was in that, and how that worked out for you.
Blue Collar was probably the biggest thing that happened in my career. It was me and Jeff Foxworthy and Ron White and Larry the Cable Guy. And
even you call him Larry the Cable Guy.
Dan. Yes. Yeah. Which that's how I make him mad, is I call him by his real name. But this thing got put together by our management team, and it was surreal. An interesting story about it. It became the largest tour in the history of comedy. But an interesting story about how things work out. We were supposed to do our first show in Orlando, Florida.
That's where I'm from.
Yeah, and something happened and the show couldn't go on that night, so they moved it to Omaha, Nebraska. And the opening night, we sold 9,000 tickets to a comedy show, which was unheard of. Years later, we went back to Orlando, and it was the slowest date we did. So if we'd have started in Orlando, Blue Collar probably wouldn't have happened, because they'd have pulled the plug on it. But Blue Collar became, it literally was the perfect storm. We were right, the audience was right.
Timing,
everything was right. And it was, like I said, surreal that we were selling, we held the record in Nashville for selling out the arena in one day. And then, like 2 years ago, Bon Jovi broke it. Okay, the words Bon Jovi and blue collar comedy do not go together at all. But it was just because I think what we did was we touched an audience that had been largely overlooked by media. Because in the media, especially in show business, it's the East and West Coast, and that's all that matters. They don't take into consideration the billions of people that live in the middle of the country who buy all the products and do and it was just a perfect match. Jeff and I were kind of the same. We were both what's the old saying, a lighter shade of pale. Because he's a family guy, I'm a family guy. He's a clean comic. Ron was kind of the bad boy, and Dan was what the tour really needed.
Meaning Larry.
Larry, yeah.
Right.
Larry was, he was, I don't want to say the cartoon, but he was the guy that, I mean, the get her done thing just exploded.
What was the dynamic like with the four of you in terms of the teamwork?
It was great. It really was great. And I'll tell you why, because we were friends before this.
Yeah.
We all knew each other, and we all respected each other's stand-up. And
you're still friends?
Still friends.
Do you collaborate at all still?
Unfortunately, locale makes it a little difficult. We, text and email and stuff, but yeah, and I always get asked, are we going to get back together? And I always say, I never say never, but it'd have to be, my theory is you leave them wanting more, which will then, as we get on further into
the Spice Girls did it.
Yeah, well,
Beverly Hills
and the Eagles have done it
Yeah.
immensely. They've retired 30 times, I think.
Yeah.
But, the thing is, Scott, you don't want to go to a town, because our audience has gotten older, we've gotten older, and you don't want to go to a town where you sold 10,000 tickets and now you're selling 2,000, because in an arena, that's very evident.
Right. It's your brand.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some lessons you've learned as a communicator. So you've been on radio, television, and movies. Obviously, you've mastered a stage. You mentioned you do a lot of corporate events also. I'll talk about that in a moment.
Okay.
Our main audience really are professionals that are trying to build and sustain their leadership skills.
Right.
And a key contributor to being a great leader is being able to listen and to communicate. And too many times we as leaders confuse communicating with just talking and not listening. Right. What role does listening play when you're on stage, even perhaps in your preparation as a comedian?
I think I don't. Listening is a very underrated word, in the sense that it's not always just listening for words, but listening to reactions. Like for me, I can listen to an audience without them saying a word. I can tell when a joke's working.
Because their body language.
And it's interesting because, like I said, because of the amount of corporate work I do, I see a lot of CEOs, marketing people get up and talk, and they don't know what their audience is. They've got salespeople, they've got correspondents from all over the country, all over the world.
Right.
They're
just delivering their message.
They're just delivering their message,
audience.
and it's just reading off a prompter. Right. And I can look out in the audience and see people. they can't yawn because they don't want to get fired.
Right.
But I'll tell you a great story about the communications. I got hired for a job down in Florida again. And the guy called me and said, listen, I've got this international business and we want you to perform. And I said, okay. He said, it's 100 guys. And I said, okay, out of that 100, how many are international, how many are American? And he goes, it's like 90% American, 10% international. I said, okay. I get down there and it's just the opposite. It's 90% international and 10% American. Scott, I did 15 minutes and there was not a titter.
Yeah.
Not a snicker.
Because your timing wasn't...
They didn't understand. They're from other countries.
Yes.
They don't understand it.
Yeah.
And so...
But you probably realized it.
I knew, and I was also young, and trust me, there was sweating.
Yeah.
And at one point, out of the pitch blackness of this room, and it was like a Fellini film. It was just a spotlight on me and this pitch black room. And out of the darkness, I hear this voice go, "Do you do any South African jokes?"
You're like, I got a whole litany of them.
I said, dude, I'm from Texas. I thought it was just Africa. And so another 10 minutes went by, and literally in my head, this was the game plan. I said, I'm going to get off stage. I'm going to say, just fly me home. Don't worry about paying. This is not. And so I said goodnight, and the guy came up to me and goes, why'd you get off stage? I go, they're not laughing. He goes, they're British. They don't laugh.
Yeah.
And I said, then why'd you hire a comedian? But I heard what he said, and I said, all right, let's try something. And then what I did was I went table to table, sat down, drank a beer with them, told them the dirtiest jokes I knew, and they thought it was the greatest show they'd ever seen in their life. So in that sense, I listened. I listened to what they weren't familiar with my lifestyle and and all this. And I think that sometimes that CEOs or COOs or what, and I know a lot of it's dull material, but they've got to get it out there. But I always thought that it would be a great position in a company, and I think companies should think about this. It is on a as an independent contractor, hire a comedian that you feel like is your style of people. Like say if someone, like I'm very much a storyteller, and then you go and you sit down with the CEO and say, let me see your speech. And you start...
coach them for the
Coach them for it. Because
yeah.
nobody is above learning. I've learned, that's one of the things I've learned, is that you're never above learning. And just because, I've reached a certain level in my career, it's still incumbent upon me to get my message across in a way that people leave in my business, my goal is to make people leave feeling better than they did when they got there. Yeah. As opposed to, and like a CEO, I would assume you would want people, when you get done speaking, you want people to go, this is why I work for this company. I'm with you.
You speak at a lot of corporate events. Mm-hmm. You're there to provide some relief, a respite or such. Right. Can you think of one where a CEO has delivered, he or she, a compelling speech, and you say, no, that was good. That was out of the norm. You connected with the audience. They were still professional, but they really did something unique that was different than all the other ones that put you into a sleep. Because you probably watched them, right?
There was one. I can't remember the guy's name, but it was a grocery, a food company, and they invited all the mom and pop grocers in for their big yearly thing. And this guy, we walked in. And there's a party band on stage. And there's a guy with a sombrero on dancing up there. And I said, what is that? And she goes, oh, that's our CEO. And these people loved him because he became one of them.
Yeah, he was relatable.
He was relatable.
Right.
And I thought, this is a very smart man. Because I think sometimes, whether they do it consciously or subconsciously, I think when you start putting CEO, COO, CFO, also it's kind of like... they forget who's
I think you're absolutely
Joe,
right.
the bolt maker, and Gina, the person that does all the emails. Selling. Or your sales is to let them know that you didn't start off being a CEO. You were one of those people. Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of executives in the corporate world could benefit, is to remember where you came from.
Superb insight, because I think there becomes a natural separation. Between the C-suite.
I can't
and
laugh.
The company.
That's Mr. Smith. That's
exactly right.
But if Mr. Smith walks up there and starts off with a joke, or some kind of, it's funny because sometimes I'll do, and this is a rule that I have. If people I've had people hire me and they say, here's what we want to do. We're going to introduce you as an auditor kind of guy that we've brought in. And I go, no. And they say, why not? And I go, because those people can tell you right off the bat, I'm not from this. Because there's a language,
sure,
there's a
culture
of this business. And if I walk up there going, we've studied your book, like, he's not one of us.
Yeah.
So I just say, just let me do my stuff. And it knock on wood,
so far,
it usually works.
Tell us about the preparation process that you go through when you're giving a speech, when you're on stage entertaining. I'm guessing you have some research you do. What do you do well that translates into our audience as they're preparing to give a presentation or a speech that you think would be helpful to know?
I think you've got to be self-effacing. You've got to portray to them that, look, I'm at this position, but here's the mistakes I've made. They want to know you're like them. And so what I do when I'm writing a bit or a routine, I always bring it back on me. In other words, I don't say like if I make a joke about my wife, the joke is about, but
not at her expense.
It's not at her expense. It's
right.
me being the idiot.
Right.
Right. And I'm not saying executives should say, look, I'm an idiot, but you've got to be vulnerable.
Right.
They've got to know that you've been through them. Mm-hmm. You've been through this. Mm-hmm. You didn't,
That's your brand, isn't it? I mean, your brand is probably the ultimate relatable person, the guy.
I always try to write my stuff as like, I could be your next door neighbor. If you didn't know what I did, I could be a doctor, I could be a plumber, I could be a sheetrock.
We kind of were.
yeah, we were. And I think that the other thing that I think is important, and I try to do this, is you got to meet them. You got to meet the people and shake their hands and say, "How's your family doing? What's going on?"
Do you do that?
Yeah, at meet and greets.
Before or after?
Before.
You do.
People get to come back and meet me, and I always ask how they're doing.
Yeah.
Because they're all like, and you want to put them at ease. I think that's the key put your audience at ease. Let them know this is all right. We're all right.
What advice would you give the professional who's got a fear of public speaking? We know it's a very real thing. Yeah. It's psychological, it's physical, it's emotional, it's neurological. And you do this all the time for a living. Now, you may be a naturally charismatic person and it's not a fear for you. Any advice you would give professionals to say, relax on this or don't worry about that? What have you learned that's not true about the fears we make up about public speaking?
Well, Seinfeld had the greatest line ever. They did a survey of people's top 5 fears. Death was number 2.
Right.
Speaking in public was number 1.
Right.
And Seinfeld's answer was, so you'd rather be the guy in the box than the guy giving the eulogy.
Yeah.
And it's true. But what I would say is, I go back to this again and again, Scott, is that if you're scared, if you're not scared, if you have a fear of speaking in public, let them know that. Let them
Part
know.
of the vulnerability, relatability piece, right?
Say, look, I know I make multi-billion-dollar decisions, but you know what? I'm shaking in my pants right now.
Yeah.
And immediately people go, okay, all right. I would be too. I would be too. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, it's good advice.
And the other thing, don't tell them. This is a true story. I was getting ready I literally was standing on the side of the stage, and the CEO was up there introducing me, and the guy says, "Don't say the company's name." I said, "What?" He goes, "We've just been bought, and half these people don't know they don't have a job tomorrow." Don't tell me that right before I go on stage, because I don't. A, it's none of my business, and B, it's like you've lied to these people.
Yeah.
You've already lied to them. But I do think that people just in general want to know. Like one of the biggest comments I get is they go, "It's like you live in my house," and that's what people want to know. Just make it. Let me know you're like me. Even I know you're this. I know you're the CEO, but let me know that you put your pants on just like I do. Don't come off high and mighty. It doesn't do anything but people just go.
Anything you do to course correct during a presentation. So you're in, you think you've got it, you're going to nail it, and a couple minutes in you realize this isn't going so well.
Yeah.
Any tips you might share with the audience to say, here's how you can subtly course correct or regroup when it's not going well?
Well, that's very difficult to do, especially in comedy, because if I've got a set routine that I'm going to do for them, and the worst part is they laugh really hard at one joke, and you don't have any more jokes on that subject.
Yeah.
But I think it goes back to just make a joke about it. If you didn't get the response, just say, well, I thought that one would do better than it did, and I guarantee you they'll laugh.
Do you tend to prepare a set sequence? I know that Joan Rivers, I think, used to have giant. I saw like poster boards all across the stage. She had all of her jokes down, and no one knew that. Like they were all taped down. It was quite a science to her comedy.
Several people do that. I can't. I just feel like it's got to come from your soul. It's like
I agree.
I can have papers written all over, but if I'm out in the audience, I can see you going.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's also lack of preparation.
The same for PowerPoint. I'm getting ready to give a speech at Deer Valley, Utah.
I hate PowerPoint.
And the conference is really angry at me because I haven't loaded up my PowerPoint onto their website. And I finally called the lady and I said, listen, I don't use PowerPoint. I said, I perhaps am either the end of a generation or the start of a new one, but I don't want to be slave to what's on the screen behind me and my cadence be there. I just want to talk from the heart. And I want to connect with the audience. And she actually handled it quite well. I said, but you're not going to get any slides from me. I don't use PowerPoint.
Yeah, I'm not I don't know.
It's not your medium anyway. But
I have a friend named Don McMillan who is a wonderful comedian who does his whole show's a PowerPoint. But it's a PowerPoint of she'll put it on the screen and goes, show a diagram of a mall. And it said, this is me shopping. And the PowerPoint goes to one store and it goes back out to the parking lot.
Yeah.
He said, now this is my wife. And he clicks it and it's just like this.
Yeah.
But
it works for his medium.
Yeah, his medium. Right. But for me, no. There's two things I don't do. I don't do slides and I don't perform in a tuxedo. I always hate when I hear, that's the other thing. If you're gonna have a corporate event, don't make it black tie. Because people, as soon as you button that top button,
that's the standard. That's the culture. Yeah.
Done.
Yeah, you've done a lot of different things. Your brand's pretty diverse. You've done television and movies and stand-up and such. Do you think that was helpful building your brand, kind of doing different mediums versus saying, I'm going to have a TV program that's going to run for 10 episodes?
Without
was it deliberate?
Yeah, I've literally, back in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, there was probably no less than 5 to 6 stand-up shows on television. Evening at the Improv, One Night Stands, and I did every one of them. And my friends would go, "Why are you doing all these?" I go, "So that people know who I am."
Yeah, for you it was brand recognition.
Yeah, it's like, and it's interesting. You talk about the brand recognition. I also think, I get people say to me all the time, "How do I create a brand? How do I create a catchphrase like "Here's your sign," or "You might be a redneck," or "Get her done." And I always tell people, I go, you don't. The audience dictates it. Especially in business, I think too, is you've seen products that they try to force down your throat, and you just go, it's just not me. Find out who your audience is. I think that's another major thing. I think is who's your audience. Like for me, my audience is not going to be the millennials. My audience is people who are parents.
Yeah.
My demographic is probably 35 to 85. And I think that's important too, especially in the business world, is know who you're marketing to. If you're selling an axe sharpener, you're probably not going to go sell that in New York. So I think it's important that you know what your product is, who you're selling it to, and then talk to them on their level.
Tell us about Dancing with the Stars. So you had an episode, a season on Dancing with the Stars.
Why did I know this was coming up?
You're fairly well known for the Cartwheel. Tell me what happened with, why did you do that?
Well,
why was that a good thing?
Dancing with the Stars, in a short story, because otherwise it will be another 45 minutes, is I had torn my meniscus in my right knee, and I had surgery, and I was in bed the next day. And you know when you have surgery and the anesthesiologist says, "Look, don't make any important decisions for 24 hours."
Right.
There's a lot of truth to that.
Oh, is this when you accepted
it? Yeah, I was in bed still floating with Captain Demerol.
Yeah.
And Dancing with the Stars called and said, "We want you to be on the show."
Yeah.
And to show you what an idiot I am, I literally said, "Yeah, I could judge that." why else would they be calling me? And they said, well, actually, we want you to be a contestant.
And this is where I realized there was like a set panel of judges.
Yeah, I thought I'd just be a celebrity judge,
Okay. Yeah.
And they said, we want you to be a dancer on the show. And I'll be honest with you, Scott, I don't know if it was me or the Demerol, but the next word I heard was, sure.
Yeah.
And so I was on. And the reason I got so far on it was not because of my dancing ability. It was because I figured out what it was. Again, I listened. I watched, I listened. It's a popularity contest. If it was a dance competition, none of us would have been asked to do it.
You made the audience fall in love with you.
I was one of them.
Partner.
I was one of them.
You were
I
relatable.
was
They were cheering you on.
Joking around.
Right.
Probably, and it's interesting because probably the biggest thing that helped me on that show was the fact that my age and my dance partner's age was so far apart.
Right. British partner, right?
Yeah, it
right?
became more of a dad-daughter
Yes,
dance.
right.
There wasn't any of the weird
Right.
ooh, and
Right.
what's going on,
Right.
And I just didn't play the game. I just said, they said, who are you scared of? I go, nobody. I go, I'm just trying to get through a damn dance.
How far did you get?
I got to the finals.
That's insane.
Yeah,
That's insane.
Yeah. It was. I think there was actually wagers in Las Vegas as to when I would go.
Did your wife come out and watch the show?
every
She
week?
did.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that was the other thing that somehow, I don't know how, but somehow I just get this message. Like I would dance with this smoking hot 24-year-old British girl. But at the end of the dance, I ran over and kissed this 55-year-old woman.
Well, I've met your wife. There's good reason. That's
and
right.
every woman in America went, oh.
Yeah, right.
Why
Vote
can't
for
you be
him.
like that?
Yes, right. For you, it was a little bit of an acting gig.
It totally was
Right?
acting.
Yes.
Totally was
Yeah,
acting.
Yeah. What did you learn from hosting and starring in the Bill Engvall show? You had a comedy series. What did you learn from that?
That was the greatest experience. Next to Blue Collar. I mean, that's the what's the word I'm thinking of? That's the holy grail for a comedian.
Yeah.
I remember standing outside of a studio, and when those big doors that they move stuff in and out, and it said the Bill Engvall show, and I just stood there and I go, oh my gosh! I go, I made it. I made it. This is what everybody shoots for. Not just I'm on a sitcom. It's a sitcom with my name on it.
Right.
And I tell you again, back to the listening and back to making people feel comfortable. Before the show started, I got the whole cast together, and we went out to dinner. And I stood up at the table and I said, every day, you should come to this set with a smile on your face. I said, we're not curing cancer. We're not splitting the atom. We're making a sitcom. You're going to drive onto the lot, and there's going to be a parking space with your name on it. And there's going to be a little production assistant that's going to come up and say, Mr. Engvall, here's your coffee just the way you like it. And I go, and you should enjoy every moment of that. And I think sometimes what I see in the corporate world is the enjoyment factor is gone. I'll tell you an interesting story about just that point right there. One day I landed at the airport and the car service picked me up, and I always talk to people. I love talking to people because A, you find out fascinating things, and B, sometimes there's material there. But I was talking to the driver, and I said, tell me about you. What do you do? I know you drive, but he goes, I was the CEO of a company. And he said, every day I went in, and there was this problem and this fire to put out, and I had to get this done and this done. He goes, and I just got tired of it. He said, and so I gave my retirement. I said, I'm leaving. He said, I became a limo driver. And he said, it's the best job I ever had in my life. He said, I just stopped enjoying it. And I think that's a real key to people that I think is that they don't spend enough time. If you're not having fun at it, guess what?
Amen.
You're not going to be fun to work for.
Right.
And you're not going to get the best production out of your people. I think there's a one question that you have to, and I ask myself this all the time, how much is enough? And are you happy? And
if you can't define how much is enough, you'll never have enough.
No, if you know, I have a friend, well, he's a workaholic, and I said, give me a number for you to quit. And he sat there for a second, and he goes, 65 million. And I said, what? I go, 65 for you personally? He goes, yeah. And I go, okay, I think maybe you need a reality check. There's businesses that don't make 65 million total gross. Because it's interesting because my manager asked me that question. When I signed with him, he said, how much would it take for you to quit? And I said, if I had $3 million in the bank, because that could get me through the rest of my life. So $3 million and $65 million. So I think you have to set reasonable goals.
Sure.
But again, back to how much is enough. You know, it's hard to say, but if you, sometimes I think there's the old saying that the older you get, the wiser you get. That I remember my granddad always saying, he said, you know, and everybody's heard this before, is that if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And that's kind of where I am with comedy. And I think that to any of the leaders out there that, you know, the corporate world, that, you know, are you happy? I mean, are you really, you know, yeah, you're happy when you get the check, but is it worth, you know, what are you losing? And I think sometimes that's where I've become, now in my life, I'm at that stage where I think, you know, I'm really, really happy. You know, I can, if I left this business tomorrow, nobody's going to say, ooh, you almost made it. And I think the other thing, Scott, is that I think the term success needs to be redefined. I think sometimes now in this world that we've reached the point where success has become a monetary value. Mm-hmm. And it's not. Success to me is, am I able to put a roof over my family's head? Am I able to put food on the table? And is me and my family happy? And if you can answer all three of those yes, then you're a success.
Well, you've had an interesting year because you shared within the last year you were invited to be the officiant of a family's friend's wedding. Walk us through that, because this is kind of a bit of a, not an epiphany, but it's a bit of a maturing year for you, is it?
Yeah,
personally?
Very much a mature. That's a very good way to put it. It's a very mature.
Because you were highly immature last year.
Yeah,
right?
really. I was
just right.
You know, it goes back to college. I didn't finish college, and it always bothered me. And so one day I was bored, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to go online and get ordained as a minister, just in case friends or family wanted to do it. And I got the certificate.
There was no one had asked you. You just decided.
Yeah, I just decided.
Yeah,
something
the woodpeckers weren't there that day.
Yeah. The woodpeckers were not hitting the wood, and you know the highway patrol wasn't hiring. So, so the certificate came, and I thought, well, and I looked down, and I thought, well, I don't want to be that guy. I want to be the guy who knows what he's talking about. You know, so I am now enrolled back in college online and getting a degree in Christian studies, and I'm really a fan of theology, the history of the Bible and everything. And it's interesting because before my son went off to college, I sent off for my transcripts, because I think my grade point average at the time when I was in my late teens and early 20s was, I think the high was 1.7. And I set it in front of him and I said, this is what happens when you don't go to class. I said, all you got to do is show up and something will sink in. And now I'm back in school and I've got a 3.9.
Wow. And
but also it goes back to the other one. I'm enjoying it, and it's also kind of affected my. I think this is another really good point to leaders out there, is it's affected my comedy, because I now know why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I'm not saying go re-enroll in college, but don't think that just one avenue is good enough.
Your curiosity.
Yeah, if something turns you on, go. You don't know what it, you know. And so now I'm not only doing comedy on stage, and I'm so much more comfortable in my own skin. But like in November, I'm giving a sermon at the church that I grew up in, which is a very cool moment. Will be a very cool moment.
In Texas.
And actually in Winslow, Arizona.
I see.
Me and the Eagles were the only people that ever came out at Winslow, Arizona, and the Eagles weren't even there. It was Jackson Brown. But I think that sometimes we get so tunnel vision on something that I always told my son. I said, life will show you what you're supposed to do, but you got to be open to it. And so if something shows up and you think, oh, that might, you never know how it's going to intertwine and further your career. And I feel I've added years now to my stand-up career because I now know kind of where I want to be. You know, an interesting story about the blue collar thing, going back to that, is that I think we did that thing for 6 years. But probably the first 3, I didn't enjoy it because I was too busy trying to be Jeff. Because Jeff had skyrocketed. You know, he was huge. And that's the only bar that I had to compare to. You know, I had passed the club comics, and I was so big. Oh my God, Scott, you would have laughed. I used to have this rock and roll opening, music playing, lights going, and it just, you know, I was trying anything just to figure out who I was, and all of a sudden this other avenue kind of opened up, and I kind of realized, just be who you are.
I was going to ask you what the key to your success was, but I think I know. And I think your unique value proposition, if you will, to use a marketing term, is your relatability. It's you put as little space between you and the audience as is possible.
I agree 100% with that. And in fact, I think that then dovetails into corporate.
True. I think
you've got to be.
It's true.
If you can't relate to those people there, they're
if
not.
They can't relate to you as
and
well.
They can't
too.
relate to
the
you.
More
either.
the more they find you relatable.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that you still can't be the CEO or the CFO. You
got
have
plenty
your
of
own
time
duties. That's right.
You know, and like I always tell, you know, I always say the good ones, and I've seen a few of them that do this. You know, this guy's the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation, and I'll tell you where it was. It was there was an aircraft engine people that make parts for and they hired me to come in, and great group. But the thing that really impressed me most was the CEO. I watched him, and we were sitting there talking, and one of the underlings came up and just said he really enjoyed the conference. You know, thank you very much. And he goes, "What are you doing?" And I goes, "No, I'm going to go back to my room." He goes, "Let's go get a beer." And you could see this guy, like, okay, am I being punked here?
Yeah.
But now that guy, and he and the CEO went off to the bar and somebody a beer. Huh. And he became, because the CEO became one of them.
Yeah, right.
And I'm not saying you got to go have a beer with everybody, but you know, it doesn't hurt. You know, maybe you do. You know, I think one of the greatest shows on television right now is Undercover Boss.
I love it. Stephanie McMahon
Oh.
was on our program a few weeks ago, and when I saw her from WWE on the program, I had tears in a hotel room.
Yeah.
I was so captivated. I agree.
People, because and the thing is not so much what they do is great, but the thing I watch is, as a CEO or an executive, there becomes that gap, and you don't see what's going on. Mm-hmm. You're not there every day stacking the tires, and you're just up there trying to get more accounts.
You think you know, but you don't.
You don't know.
Right.
And I say, take your time. Take the time to go down and visit with them. Put on a pair of jeans and a T-shirt. Lose the suit. Tell me what's going on.
Yeah.
Tell me what can I do to make your job easier. And I'd be damn surprised if you don't walk away there with reams of paper saying, well, we could use this.
Right. Good advice. I didn't prep you for this, but I want to end with a mistake. Is there a mistake you've made on stage or with an event that you'd like to share appropriately, and kind of what you learned from it?
Yes, there was one.
There's one that's clear.
Very clear. I was doing my show, and I am the most non-confrontational person in the world. I don't like it. And I was doing my show, and the show was going great. And I looked down, and there was a woman sitting on the front row, and I said, "Oh my God!" I had talked about my kids, and I said, "When does your baby due?" And she said loud enough for the entire audience to hear, "I'm not pregnant."
Oh my Lord!
There is no escaping that.
Yes.
Everybody heard it. Everybody's looking at me like, "What are you going to do?" And I just said, I'm sorry.
Right.
I just said, "I'm sorry."
Yeah.
And now I have a rule that unless the woman's water breaks right in front of me,
yes,
I'm still not going to assume she's pregnant.
In fact, you mentioned to me in a previous conversation that there are a couple topics that you absolutely don't go to because you will alienate immediately half the audience.
Religion and politics.
That's it.
Religion and
never
politics.
talk about Trump. You don't talk about
Nope.
religion, including your own.
Nope. I am that yellow line in the middle of the road.
Right.
Because it's just not worth it. It's not worth it. Like I told you, even if I write the greatest political or religious joke, 50% are alienated because, especially in today's society,
you kind of can't recover because you said they're fickle and you've made a judgment, and
you know, it's and again, I think it's like sometimes comics, I've seen it happen all the time. They get bigger. They think they're bigger than they are, and you're not.
You're not as immune as you think.
I would tell every entertainer out there in the world, I go, nobody cares about your political views.
Yeah.
Sing your song.
What's next for you?
I think Bill Engvall on ice would be nice. Scott.
In Sun Valley.
It's
a one-night show.
I'll tour with Disney, Scott, I don't know. And
you're getting degreed soon.
I'm getting degreed
That's right.
soon. I may go to seminary
You're a man
school.
of the cloth.
Yeah. I don't know where it's going to lead. This goes back to what I told my son. I'm just kind of waiting to see what life throws at me right now. And I know that whatever it is, I'll embrace it and we'll run with it and see where it leads us.
Bill, an honor. Thanks for joining us.
Scott.
Good luck
I really
to you. Hello to
appreciate
your
that.
wife and your family
I
as well.
will do that. Thank you.
I wish the Woodpeckers less success. It's a different off
I think that's a
joke.
losing battle.
Hey, thank you all. Thanks to Bill Engvall, the master communicator, who's just simply chosen comedy as his medium. Great insight around, as all leaders, lessen the distance between you and your people. Become more relatable, because the closer you are to them, the more you can appreciate the role they play in the organization, and you can help them achieve their own goals in your company. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you back here next week with a new guest for On Leadership.